Hello and welcome to a special episode of the Compliance Catch-Up. My name is Brielle Hewitt. I head up marketing and partnerships here at Fingerprint. I know I'm not the normal face that you're used to. James Hogben can't make it today, so I am standing in for him today. Most importantly, it's time to focus on the latest industry news at hand. Last Friday's Supreme Court ruling and the FCA's proposed redress scheme for motor finance customers here in the UK. Fortunately, I'm not going to be relied on to be a subject matter expert today. I have a knowledgeable panel of people that will be able to discuss the latest updates in detail. Bear with me. I am not only hosting, but I'm also being the technical person. So I'm going to bring everyone in. Hopefully it's not going to be too painful. Okay. Nick, I think your camera may be off. So here he is. Firstly, I'm going to hand over to Nick McDonald. He's co-founder of the Compliance Guys, and he can give it a bit of an intro about who he is, what he does, and why this is an important topic for him.
Thanks, Brielle, and thanks for the welcome, the invitation along. I run a compliance consultancy firm. We are very heavily based in the motor industry, and as you can imagine, I haven't had a weekend yet. So my weekend's this weekend, not last weekend. And we've been trying to keep up with it for everyone's sake. I've been talking about this all week and I'm already bored of it. But there's still a lot of questions, and I think a lot of misunderstanding. And I think it's important that those of us who have got the time to spend digging into this are available for people to ask questions and to get some insight, because there's probably a lot of worry around.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I'll now hand over to David Billsborough, who is owner at Cheshire Cars. If you can also give an introduction to who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. By the name of the business, I own Cheshire Cars, which I founded almost 30 years ago, based in Cheshire, surprisingly. And my sector is used cars, so hence the reason I'm here, to hopefully give you some feedback and to give you some positivity going forwards as an industry. It's a sector I feel very, very passionate about. And indeed, I was a founder member of the Independent Motor Dealers Association, which is still very strong today. And we'll touch on that later in the conversation, I'm sure.
Perfect. Thank you. And then last but not least, Patrick McGovern. He heads up regulatory consulting over at S&W.
Yeah, thank you. And as said there, I'm in the new regulatory consulting team at S&W. I think this is key for us. Similar to Nick, a lot of our clients are in the motor finance industry, and clearly there's a lot of worry and a lot of confusion at the minute. And so any kind of insight we can offer and help people out, I think it's key to do.
Excellent. So just to start off with, obviously there's been a lot of news, there's been a lot of information thrown at us over the last 5 days. I am very new to this topic, so what I'd really appreciate is if everyone can just give a bit of a rundown from your perspective of the Supreme Court ruling itself, and then obviously now the FCA consulting and the redress scheme. So Nick, if you want to start off, where are you at? Where are we at in terms of the industry?
Thanks. I mean, usually I like to defer this to someone who's actually a solicitor or a barrister to give this part, but I'll try and give my best rundown, which really is that 3 cases, got, that were turned down at the regional courts for a, missold commission claim. And that was on the basis of should the motor dealer or broker have had a disinterested duty or a fiduciary duty, which literally means acting not in their interest, but completely independently in the interests of the consumer. Should that have happened, and should the commission be repaid? That went to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal, quite surprisingly to everyone last year, ruled in the customer's favour. And that caused shockwaves through the industry and other industries, to the point where everyone, quickly then put in full disclosure, which may not have been there before. And everyone waited with bated breath until this year, when it went through the Supreme Court, to see if all of that or some of that got overturned. So we found out on Friday that 2 of the cases, were the appeals were stayed. So the lenders won, and so the fiduciary duty, the disinterested duty, and any bribery was overturned. But one of the cases still was a high commission. The disclosure was incorrect, and it was found that a relationship was unfair between the lender and the motor dealer. And so the FCA then announced over the weekend, after some very quick work, that there will be a redress scheme. And I guess what we're discussing this week is what that means for everyone.
Excellent. And David, I'll hand over to you. I know that you're very much in the thick of it as a business owner, but from your perspective, how have you taken on the information that's been thrown your way, and where do you see what we're currently at?
I think for most dealers running a business, a small business like mine or a medium-sized business, it's been trying to sort of cut through what is factual and what is hearsay, really. And I think when there's so many people making noises, that it's been very difficult at times. So those of us that are a part of an association, which I am a member of, is helpful to be a part of an association. And it's also helpful to have people such as Nick, who I know runs a very good and professional assistance business, I call it, for dealers, and ensures that dealers are well aware of what is available and what help is there for them. So I think it's been a little bit unnerving because there's been such a lot of news. It's been on national TV, of course, and on every social media post, there's something popping up for the claims management companies advertising. And sometimes I think some of the choice of words could have been left out or been improved upon, but that's happened now. That's in the past. We've had the judgment from the Supreme Court on Friday, which I received on my iPhone on the train coming back from a failed pickup of a vehicle. So it was a busy Friday for me. Busy Friday for me, but I was very pleasantly surprised because I did feel it could potentially go the other way. But then I've tried to run my business and not take too much notice of it because I feel my business has been run professionally and empathetically to customers, and that's always been the case. And that's why we have some phenomenal reviews, and we've been in business 29 years now. So it was a case of business as usual, but obviously being aware of what was going on in the background. So for us, it's been a busy time, and we're obviously pleased with the result. Is it half time? Is it fair to say it's half time? Because the FCA obviously are going to review one of the cases that was upheld, and we'll wait to see what comes of that.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. And Patrick, from your perspective, what has your last week been like? What's your take?
Busy, as you can imagine.
I
think kind of touching on David's point there, we don't really know exactly how this is going to shake out yet. And so it is a case of kind of doing the best you can at the moment to kind of understand. There has been guidance given around what amounts to that unfair relationship. But it's not yet been interpreted by the FCA to kind of hopefully give some clear instructions as to exactly what contracts will fall within those parameters. But I think what we've been trying to do is nevertheless take an initial review and try and get some clarity to these firms in the interim period until that FCA guidance is in place, to give them an idea of what their liabilities are, because obviously that's the biggest fear for most firms at the moment is, whilst it's not necessarily terrible news with the judgment, and as David said again, it could have been a lot worse. There's still likely to be some redress to these firms, and it's a case of understanding exactly to the best we can at the moment what that's going to look like.
Absolutely. Am I right in saying this is quite an unprecedented time? Like even the fact that the FCA were working over the weekend and there was the announcements made over the weekend, it feels like this is a big thing. This is a thing that we haven't seen very often in this industry. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, for sure. I think it really is, as you say, a landmark case, and that's going to have massive ramifications for the whole of the motor finance market, which is often not the case. And I think you can see things like the Treasury getting involved to try and put their input into the case. It's all markers that actually, depending on what way the judgment fell, this could have serious and long-term ramifications for the lending and the dealing market. So I think what we've seen is that exactly that. It's a big case that is going to have ramifications, but as I say, hopefully less of a shake-up than it perhaps could have been.
Absolutely. So on that perspective, we've obviously got two compliance specialists on the call. If we look at what the next steps are, or this sort of intermediary period, I know that you have been having many conversations. There's been a lot of information shared. Nick, what would you start with in terms of sort of bringing down the information into something that's digestible? As to what
I think the first thing to say is that I think it feels like it's come thick and fast, touching on what Patrick said, because the FCA have got involved so quickly.
Yeah.
But most of that is for market integrity. I think sometimes what goes in our own little worlds, that's both in business, but also as individuals, we forget that if it's the same thing affecting millions of people, it actually affects markets, and that's the instability of the country and the economy is not good for anyone. So while it's worrying that the FCA have put out any information at all before taking too many views on it, unfortunately, it was probably necessary.
Yes.
And what comes next is that we've got a period now till the start of October before the FCA put out their redress scheme, which, by the way, will look like this is what we think it should look like. Give us feedback, but they will try and by that point have designed it to the point where they're fairly happy with it. But so they're taking a lot of views in the meantime. So I think the first thing is to go back through your trade bodies, through your compliance consultants, and give your views so that you can have a voice. A joint voice is much more powerful than an individual one, and I think David would probably agree that his views on this will probably mirror a lot of other independent motor dealers, and that'll be the same for everyone in any sector. So that'd be my first advice: is talk to people and share your views.
Excellent, thank you. And I mean, I'm speaking in marketing speak here, but we do something where we talk about sort of a 3, 6, 9 month plan, and it almost feels like this is a necessary way of looking at things, where there's an interim period till October, then there's going to be next steps according to what the FCA says. So again, from your perspective, Nick, we'll start with you. The first thing you've said is talk to people, get your point across. But what are the next steps? What are the things that businesses need to prepare for, and who is going to be most impacted?
I think all things point to the fact that the lenders are the ones who are going to be affected first and directly. Without getting too technical, the judgment was on a section of the Consumer Credit Act which affects lenders, not brokers directly. So the parts that affected brokers in these specific cases was actually struck out. So there's no direct impact on brokers or dealers to start with. So the first thing is to speak to those. Well, look at your paperwork. Let's see if you've got any contractual agreements with the lenders. Have you got any liability directly? Look at the processes for speaking to your own customers if they inquire, and make sure you're not using up too much time. You've got a clear process for them. And then speak to your lenders and understand what they're doing about it, so you can understand what you're doing about it.
Yeah. And Patrick, from your perspective, I mean, adding to Nick's points, or again, what you're working on at the moment, what does those next 3 to 6 to 9 months look like?
Yeah, I mean, kind of echoing Nick's point there around talking to your lender. So I suppose on either side of the coin, lenders should now be having good governance practices in place to manage the dealers and the brokers they work with. But equally, that is a two-way street. And if you're not getting that information from your lender, then you should be reaching out directly to them to engage in, exactly what are you as the regulated entity, what do you want me to disclose when, and hopefully those are already embedded and in good practice. But it's going to be key to kind of cover yourself from both sides to have that in place. I think it's then also about understanding, again, what your liabilities are. So going back as much as you can, as best as you can, into historic agreements and understanding if there is any clauses within that will either open you up to liability in any way on either side. So I think that's going to be key. And then just making sure you've got as much data ready to go as possible, because the FCA understand that people have had this information for a long time, and it wouldn't surprise me if once the redress scheme is actually in place, they want quite a quick turnaround, and expect to have been doing kind of backward review in the interim period while we've been waiting for this judgment.
Yeah. So on that, that's the operational challenge of the data. I think, David, I'll hand over to you. We were discussing it earlier on. Sort of, I know one of your concerns is just the length of time that they're looking backwards. How could you bring it to life, how that might look? I mean, I know we're talking mostly about lenders, but as a business owner as well, you've got a certain way of doing things. Everyone's going to have a different way of how they've been managing those disclosures. So what would your perspective be and advice that you could give to support?
So I suppose presently everyone should be disclosing finance commission and having the customer agree to the finance commission by signing the documentation. I think making that very, very simple, keeping that onto one piece of paper, that just deals with the finance commission that is going to be paid out to the dealer on that deal. So there could be no doubt from the consumer that that is what that paperwork alludes to, the finance commission. Don't try and bury it in lots and lots of paperwork. And in fact, I think that was one of the views of the Supreme Court that on the case that was upheld, sorry, it maybe wasn't as clear as it could be. So I think the information needs to be extremely clear, and not for dealers to be apprehensive of it, just be completely clear, and explain it to them, reassure them if need be, but get them to sign the paperwork as well, and as many sort of paper trails as you can from it disclosing all of the relevant documents, asking for signatures on the bottom of the paperwork, and then keeping all that information together so it's clear, it can be got hold of when the time is there for it to be looked at. But of course, until the FCA come back with what their redress scheme is going to look like, and we're really sort of preempting things at this moment, I think. So just obviously keep doing your business. Don't be too worried about it. If you're operating as we are in a transparent way, there's probably nothing to be concerned over. But just make sure that everything is available and you can put your hands on it. So keep everything in good order and in the relevant places. I know most of us will have lost keys somewhere or lost our glasses when they're on the top of our foreheads, but no, I think it's about keeping information together and making sure everything's there if and when it's required, really. But there isn't any doubt going forwards for any dealer that the information, the level of information, will have to be pertinent to the transaction, and it should be made clear and offered to the customer in a timely manner, really. So we'll be doing that. We are doing that, and I would suggest that other dealers need to be doing it if they're not already doing it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. On that point, obviously, you work sort of in a boutique industry, David. So you were saying that the volume for you is manageable doing it. It's a very personal, a personal relationship you have with each of your clients. But Nick, you work with much larger businesses. How do you apply this at scale? How do you do this at scale, from the looking backwards to also the moving forwards?
Well, I think personally, we deal with from the smallest businesses to, the largest businesses.
Yeah.
And I think flexibility from providers, from our point of view, is very important. One of the key problems in this Johnson case was that the disclosure was incorrect. I don't necessarily think that was malicious. I think it was just the fact it hadn't been reviewed properly. And and there was no flexibility. So I think one thing is to work with your providers to make sure everything is being done properly going forward, to echo David's point of view. But from the past is just to be prepared from an operational point of view. The FCA have said that they think redress will be between 9 and 18 billion pounds, and that includes operational costs. They think that'll be somewhere in the middle. So if we say operational costs might be 4 or 5 billion, that's a huge amount of work. And obviously that is bigger for the bigger organizations.
Yeah.
But the lenders have already been working for 12 months on modeling the financial impact, and most people have got that ready. But the impact on customer service, on inquiries, on process and redress, and from the dealer side on how they handle lender inquiries, how they handle customer inquiries, is something they should be getting prepared for. Yes, the larger the business, the larger the impact. But you should also have more resource to start getting ready. But time's your friend, isn't it? You know, if you start now, when redress, you know, starts next year, or when the scheme's likely to be announced early in 26, you'll be more prepared than if you wait till it comes out.
Mm-hmm. Patrick, from your perspective, is there anything you'd add to what Nick has said, or anything that you are planning for with your clients and those that you support?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think building on Nick's point, I think particularly for the larger firms, the idea is that it's not possible to use the existing team solely to kind of deal with this increase in operational capacity in terms of handling complaints, dealing with customer redress, and that's what we found. And I think that's important to flag early, in the sense that you are going to need additional resource, or it's very likely you will, because obviously. Mm-hmm. Most of these operational teams are built on the facts of business as usual, and you'll receive X amount of complaints that are relatively consistent. Clearly, this is going to blow out of the water, and these are these are building up for months and months now. So I think it's important to identify what additional resource is necessary, and also we've worked with firms to build small independent teams that are taking this forwards. And that covers, not just the customer side of things, but also internally the operational side of things and how that's going to run, and has been running for a little while now. So I think it's key that firms just identify that this isn't a simple task, and it's going to be a lot more work, and therefore kind of plan accordingly. As Nick said, it's much better to plan and be ready for this when it comes, rather than kind of sit on your hands and having an issue later down the line.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, one of the things that seems to have happened is the FCA is basically kiboshed, without getting too opinionated, CMC businesses being the intermediary. This is very much going to be, you go directly to whoever you receive the finance from. Do you think, I'm learning about this, but as a consumer of purchasing cars, of motor finance, I might go to the dealership and say, I think that I should be getting a claim, but actually it's the lender. So how do we manage that sort of communication loop as well? And what would best practice look like from your perspective? I hope that question made sense.
Yeah, no, it did. I think the first point is that I think the FCA are clearly trying to stop CMC involvement as much as possible. Mm-hmm. I think the tally's out the bag. We've been having months and months of constant advertisements through CMCs. Yeah. The Martin Lewis situation again, where people doing it independently. So I think, most people have made their claim. And yes, when the redress scheme gets formally announced, we'll expect an uptick as well. But, as I say, the cat is slightly out of the bag. In terms of managing those complaints from, for example, the brokers up to the lenders, if that's how it settles, which it looks like it will, again, we would encourage being on the front foot. And establishing a governance process around that with the various brokers that you're working with currently, if you're a lender, and so that you've got, there should be referring complaints on anyway, but that should be a structured channel. They should know exactly who they need to go to, and then internally from the lender side, where does that go to, and onto the next stage, etc. And that should be a filtered system that's easy to implement, because as again, having loads of emails being sent, for example, of referred claims is not the way forward.
No. It feels like there is going to need to be a lot of technology implemented, and lots of people on the ground managing this as well. From your perspective, Nick, obviously you do all sorts of things at the Compliance Guys. I know you've got technology systems that support as well. How are you going to be supporting firms to do what they need to get through this time?
It's funny, actually, when the Court of Appeal decision came out, the FCA said they estimated that there'll be some but minimal impact on firms to change their complaints processes.
Interesting.
That may be the case if you're one firm.
Yeah.
If you've got 600 plus firms that you support like we do, and you need to put flexibility into the complaints for every single one, it's quite a lot of work, I can tell you, and you don't get any money back after you've spent the money on your dev team doing that. But for instance, our complaints procedure is built so that people can handle these immediately. Letters have been changed. We're changing again, obviously now with certain things. So it is nice and easy. But the FCA were very clear that even brokers should handle complaints. They shouldn't just go, you need to speak to the lender. If there's a complaint made to a regulated firm, you have to treat it as such. So it's really important that people not necessarily using technology, but they have a robust complaints process. And the main reason for that is to not risk their time. A small motor dealer, for instance, or even a large motor dealer, is going to have a negative impact on business if they spend too much time handling a complaint that with a bit of preparation could have been done much more quickly.
For sure. I think there's also the evidencing of what's been done, which is really important. And if that is just managed by what is going to be a very overworked team, that's just going to be a really hard thing to do. So the evidencing of all of this is going to be incredibly important. I think that leads into the next question I have to ask of, if we now look forward and we're talking about how we just get through this time, but for whatever reason, the motor industry is really under the spotlight. But we were talking earlier, where else do we think this might start affecting other parts of the finance sector? And again, where do we see this as? There seems to be a theme where it's information hasn't been clear. It's very hard to evidence it. Something may have not been picked up. And again, there's that ability for human error, but unfortunately, it's having a massive impact on this particular industry. But could we see it moving across any other industries?
I think Patrick will probably pick up on the other industries, but I think one thing that's important to note, even from what we've got at the moment, is that claims management companies aren't necessarily capturing claims, they're capturing people. And it was an arms race to get as many signatures as possible. When they've got those signatures, it opens them up to be able to remarket, because look, these are marketing companies. They're often not solicitors at the first instance. So, they'll maybe looking at other areas of non-compliance, maybe within motor, but they'll also then be looking at the rest of the customers' lives and where can they now use that and monetize it without going and doing more marketing. So the more the impact is softened from the FCA, the more chance there is of a pivot, in my opinion.
Fair. Patrick, what is your point of view on this one?
Yeah, I think what we've seen within the motor finance is essentially the risk that's been detailed throughout, which is that the commercial incentives may be conflicting with customer outcomes. And I guess this builds on all of the work that's been done with Consumer Duty and the FCA's now clear focus on positive customer outcomes, and I'm putting a lot more emphasis on regulated firms to elevate themselves above the rules to ensure good positive outcomes generally, rather than just as I said, they're following what's been put in front of them and abiding to those rules. I think in terms of additional industries, retail finance, in terms of buy now, pay later, we know that's a hot topic for the FCA anyway in general, but it wouldn't surprise me if this then spilled over to the the kind of brokers, if you like, of that finance. And I think also the mortgage advice, again, industry, we were discussing it earlier, where intermediaries are making product recommendations. Again, it's a similar scenario. And if anything, what we were saying earlier was, this is even more of an area where it's probably less clear to your average customer that there may be some commission structures within that process. So it wouldn't surprise me if it moved on to there as well.
Okay, fair. One thing that has struck me is, obviously after speaking to you, David, as well, the financial industry here in the UK is made up of lots of small businesses. There's obviously very large businesses, lenders that have huge networks, but it feels that there is sort of a view of the industry, but actually it's built on lots of families and people just wanting to, do well. And part of being in a commercial business is we do make profit, and there is going to be some kind of kickback if there is an introduction done. So considering there's such a focus on it now, if we're looking forwards, it's a bit of a rough time. I think it appears that, you know, you guys have articulated that consumers know that there's a way to claim, but actually in general, everyone's trying to do the right thing. But how do we move forward from this point? How do we make sure that reputation is upheld? David, I'll start with you.
I think the good businesses, and there's thousands of good businesses, both large, medium and small, will go through this and, you know, basically come out the other end. And I've learned an awful lot from it, because with every experience, you should look at gaining knowledge of that through that experience as you go through it. Obviously, it's been very well publicised in the last 12 months, particularly. And I think the industry has grown substantially in sort of professionalism in the last decade, 15 years, in my opinion. There's a lot more belief in the industry from people outside of the industry and consumers that you will get a fair hearing and a fair price and a fair experience from people, both large and small businesses, independents as well. I think the independent sector that I operate in is a great sector to be involved with, because we can move very quickly. We're very agile. As long as we have the information, or we know where to find the information, I think we're very, very good at coming out the other end, everything intact. And the integrity, I don't feel for my business has been harmed by what's been said or what's been written. I think only this week I've had some fantastic reviews coming from people, both purchases of vehicles and when we bought vehicles from the owners. So I think the integrities will be there. I think people shouldn't focus too much on that, providing everything that they're doing is, you know, above board and relevant to what they're doing. I think we've got a great future ahead of us. So I think just wait and see what the FCA come out with, and go along with what is obviously hopefully being well discussed by different agencies and associations. I think the more, Nick mentioned it a few minutes ago, I think the more of us that go and put our thoughts and feelings to the associations, and that association can then process that on our behalf, would be good for everyone, because it's a larger voice, isn't it, rather than individual voices. Yeah.
Would you like to add anything to that, Nick, or have any points to make on that sort of reputational piece and how to move forward from this week?
No, Patrick may add what he said earlier, I think, about what the true reputational damage is, though, from claims companies or not, I think.
Yeah,
happy to. I mean, I guess what I was saying earlier is I'm not sure, and, you know, kind of echoing David's point there, that there is a reputational or a serious reputational implication to this. From speaking to people in the industry and even, you know, friends and people that you know who are also affected by these ads. I think most people are seeing this as a very easy way, or so the CMC suggests, of making a claim. And you know, they see it as we can put our names down and perhaps get, you know, thousands of pounds. What I'm not seeing is a real outrage from people that I can't believe we've been, you know, misguided or misled, and therefore we want the redress. I see it more people just, you know, seeing this as a chance to potentially make some money from something they've already paid off years ago and haven't been worried about since.
Yeah, the coverage has been quite astounding, hasn't it? I'm still trying to sort of put together how it has got so big, because it is national news. I put to you, why do you think that is? You know, is it just literally just the sheer volume of chatter that's been happening about it, maybe even spurred by the CMC firms themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely spurred by the CMC firms. I would imagine it's probably just the sheer volume of people who are potentially impacted by this.
Yeah,
you know, there's often around some other similar cases like this, it's more of a niche product that only, you know, certain people are affected by, and so it doesn't get that national coverage. But what we've got here is, you know, a lot of people are driving cars, obviously, and then a lot of those people are on finance agreements, or have been in the last 14 years. So I think just the sheer amount of people impacted, then that fire stoked by the CMCs means that people are on the street talking about it, and then the media picks it up, etc., and it kind of snowballs from there.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously this week has been big. There's lots of chatter to be had. You guys have given a really good overview of, what to do in this interim period. I think moving forward, it would be really good to understand from my perspective, and anyone watching as well, once the dust has settled, what's next? So where do you move forward from here? How do you make sure that you've got that resilience, that there is hopefully not another one of these in the industry? Because I can imagine it's going to be, well, as you've already articulated, everyone, there's going to be a lot of work to sort of have to fix this. I don't know how else to put it. And then how do we move forward from there? Where would you start with that, Nick?
I think the first thing to say is that, listen to people who are trying to help you. I think it's probably easy to even look at us compliance consultants, go, you're only there to make some money. But believe me, there are more interesting things I could do to make money. I genuinely do this because I care about the people we help. So when we try and put processes in place and things, it is to protect people. And I think it's quite frustrating sometimes that some of the areas of non-compliance, you go back and you almost want to say, I told you so, because we weren't telling people so, and we wouldn't say it. But, we put things in place to try and help people. So start taking compliance more seriously, I guess, is one thing. And the other thing is that, if you are trying to do the right thing, don't worry about it, because there'll always be people trying to claim. There'll always be things that, people, the FCA might decide that something wasn't right from before. But I think David's attitude is great, is try and look after your customers, and generally you'll be okay in business. So just keep smiling, I guess.
For sure. I think that's a really good piece of advice. How about you, Patrick?
That's official advice, that is, keep smiling.
I think that's all good advice. One thing I would say from smaller firms is make sure you're documenting everything, because what we've seen a lot, across lots of different areas, is they're doing the right thing. They're actually giving the customers a much better service in the bigger firms, and it's tailored, and they're disclosing everything appropriately, but it's not evidenced, and that's where you can fall foul. So I think it's really key to make sure that all of the good stuff you are doing is documented, and the records are kept.
For sure. And how about you, David? You've got a pretty positive outlook on it, but what advice would you give to your fellow businesses out there?
Well, really, if you're documenting and you have been documenting, then just make sure that what you are doing is relevant. I think that's important, and add and build on that if the case is there. Seek out help and advice from trusted people, such as the two chaps here, Nick and Patrick, and other firms are available, of course. But anyway, and I just think, everything comes out in the end, and usually speaking, the worry that I've had in the last 18 months, because I have had a little bit of worry about it, I must be honest, it has concerned me somewhat, because it goes back a long way potentially, and obviously, if things were not documented as in the previous days as they are being done now, then obviously where does that leave me as a business owner? I've still done the right thing. I've still kept many customers happy and dealt with them time and time again on several occasions. So I think from a business owner's point of view, I would hope the FCA will get this done quickly, but obviously robustly, fairly. And I think in the meantime, for the dealers, just make sure that you can access what you might need to access to prove what has been done previously and what is being done now. But in the meantime, you just got to do that and make sure that you're still there for the customer. So you're still greeting the customer, you're still able to answer the customer and help the customer and point them in the right direction. Because after all said and done, I believe the buyers who deal with these small car dealers choose to do that. they choose to deal with the small car dealer rather than a large one. I'm sorry to say that, because there's some good large ones as well, but I'm obviously a little bit biased, and I think they choose to do it. And as long as you've got people that want to engage with you, I don't think you've got anything to worry about going forwards. But paperwork has got to be, for some people will need to improve. For other people, such as myself, we need to make sure it's still relevant and we're still not missing on getting things offered, served and signed. And then obviously the records need to be kept, don't they? So I'm optimistic that we'll have a rosy future and the industry will go from strength to strength through it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a very important part of the British economy. Obviously, British cars also. It's a very important. We need it around. From a market perspective, do you feel there is going to be a bigger impact long term, or do we think this is the storm will be weathered and we'll move forward? What do you feel, Nick?
I think the market, again, it comes back to the timing of the FCA's decision, which was the Supreme Court's decision, which was Friday afternoon, very unusual. And they actually spoke about this in the opening statement, which is it was to stop markets taking an instant reaction. The FCA had a call, which you can actually find the transcript online, with the market analysts on Sunday before the redress scheme was announced, I think, before, but either way it was on Sunday. To stop markets reacting, with volatility on Monday. I think, given the fact that two of the cases weren't upheld and the redress is well below what was, the proposed maximum redress is well below what was mentioned before, I think impact on markets will be tempered. But there's already a lot of negativity around motor finance. It's not the most profitable area for lenders. There are better places to put capital, and we all need functioning markets. Most people borrow money to buy a car, even though the guy with his fancy Mercedes tried to tell you down the pub that he paid cash for it. He didn't. And we all need access to credit. So it's important that markets aren't affected too much. So no, I don't think there'll be a huge fallout. What I will say is, though, while lenders will take some brunt of this, and I don't think dealers or brokers will, we have seen new trading agreements coming out over the last 12 months from lenders that put liability back on dealers. So when you're signing these or going to sign them, have them checked, either legally, preferably legally, but your compliance consultant sure will take a look as well, and understand that you are now saying that you will do everything correctly. So make sure that you take it seriously, because I think the next wave, lenders won't take the brunt of it; they will pass it on.
Fair. That is a very important point. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that, Patrick, that you have seen? Obviously, Nick's made a very important point. That
no, I mean, not especially. I mean, I think Nick's absolutely right. It looked at one point like it could have a huge impact, and a lot of firms may have gone under as a result of this. It's positive, the judgment that's come out, that it's only extended to this unfair. We've obviously been given the information around the estimated £950 claim per claim, which has to be taken with a pinch of salt at the moment, but is a positive sign in a way that it's not exceeding that or estimated to exceed that. So I think a lot of the big lenders will obviously be fine and have set aside funds. Some of those smaller ones you may worry about, but as I say, the liability is appearing to be less than initially thought.
Okay. Are there any other burning points you would like to make before I turn us over to see if anyone has questions? Is there anything I've missed? Again, I'm a newbie at this topic, so just bear with me. Is there anything that you think really needs to be put out there before we move on?
I think we've covered just about everything. So I think not really. I don't think so myself, personally.
No? Okay. So we have had something come in from someone. It's not a question as such, it's more a statement. But hey, you can respond to it if you choose. So someone has put in the comments, it is my belief that the FCA fully expected the judgment to go the other way. If there is to be a genuine consultation, and I'm not convinced there will be, it needs to get its act together and stop presupposing the results from the planned consultation. So not a question, a statement, but what's your take on that?
I think it's a view that a lot of people share. I'm not so sure that the FCA expected it to go the other way, certainly as we got towards the judgment. For instance, there was a change in the summary of the case. I know Paul Godsmark at Auxilius, who we speak to, highlighted this on LinkedIn, which was really useful, and it almost framed what was to come. So I think we were a little more prepared for the fact it was going to go this way. But the FCA certainly expected that there was going to be redress, and whether the consultation is seen as genuine or not, it will be genuine as in they will hear people. They're already speaking to a lot of people before they even design the consultation. And while that does happen, we've heard about it more than probably ever before. I think what's in doubt is whether the consultation outcome will be preferable to lenders in the first instance and truly what some people may see as fair, or will be somewhat pragmatic, let's say, because one of the key objectives is market functioning and trying to prevent claims that then go back into the regional courts and through FOS. And I think I may have said it to start with, sometimes paying out an amount of money is preferable to costing yourself a load of money in legal costs and operational costs. So the consultation absolutely will not suit everyone. It will be pragmatic, but we all have to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, for sure. Patrick, David, do you have any thoughts on this statement?
I think maybe the observation from what you've just spoken about there, about the person putting that in, maybe the FCA, it's a big organisation. It's covering a huge amount of ground. It's probably trying, hopefully, to be good for everyone, but it's not going to be good for everyone always. So I think we have to take the view that I would like to see them personally reach out to, in the independent sector, which is a large sector of the market, independent business owners. I would personally like them to would really like somebody like the INDA, the Independent Motor Dealers Association, to get on board with the FCA and represent the independent sector, which is obviously who they represent. So I think Nick has already reassured me that might be going to take place. So because we need to be heard, it's a sector that doesn't get much attention, and but is very vital to the economy. It employs a lot of people. So it contributes greatly to the economy, and we need a strong complete sector, but we also need a strong independent sector. So I think there's probably a little bit of doubt there in that viewer's statement, and I can understand that.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see what happens in the next coming weeks and months. I'm optimistic.
Good. And how about you, Patrick? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'm supposed to say is that this consultation process is something that happens regularly for various different points for the FCA, and so this is nothing new that they will have the consultation will be as quite far along when it gets to that stage, and they'll obviously have an idea in mind as to the end goal and where they want to end up. I think the key point, which has been said a few times today, but it can't be said enough, is to make sure that you get your voice heard and that you do go to either the associations or the bodies and really make sure that your views are going through it, because the FCA will listen, but they will listen particularly in scenarios where they're getting lots and lots of feedback on the same issue, which I think is in this case probably likely to be had. And therefore, we see once they release the final policy statement, it often has amendments and tweaks to it off of the back of the feedback they receive. So it's just really key to make sure you get that feedback in.
For sure. So I just asked if anyone has some questions, so we'll give it a few more minutes. If we don't have any questions come in, I'll just go around to each of you. What would you like to finish on? how would you like to round this up and sort of your final words? So Nick, we'll start with you.
Well, I just noticed there is one more comment, which again isn't a question.
A statement, a strong statement.
Yeah, a statement about the asset lenders and leasing lenders asking for commission disclosure around regulated and non-regulated agreements. I think this kind of goes into what I've said about, making sure we're aware of all areas of compliance. One of the things your consultants will have to do is horizon scanning. Most people will not want to read about what's coming next in regulation. Unfortunately, us boring people, Patrick's I'm sure the same as me, spend our evenings reading what's coming next because we're really that interested. And, one of the potentials is around unregulated agreements or non-regulated, agreements coming into the same scope. As, I think as small business owners, if you're a limited company, you still see yourself as a consumer and often as an individual. And this is why sometimes regulation is coming in because, as a director of a business, if you're personally liable or, it's going to affect your business, I think to some degree, commission disclosure, but many other areas of compliance falling within scope is potentially a good thing. We have to be careful not to spread it too wide, but that's probably why that's taking place.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Patrick? What would you like to finish off on?
I think I'd finish on, hopefully a positive note of this is going to be a lot worse, and it's looking like it's not going to be as bad as we first thought, which is obviously good. And I think also the other side is to do what you can now to make sure that your house is in order for everything as for new business, which I think a lot of firms have been doing, but I think it's key that you don't get caught out and everything's in place now because you can only control the future, and so let's make sure it continues to be as good as it can.
Okay, great. How about you, David?
Well, from an independence point of view, I think common sense, that's a word that we need to sort of reacquaint ourselves with, because a lot of this regulation is common sense. And I think independent dealers, business owners have a lot of common sense. So I think providing we still have that and we still implement it, I think the future will, be fine for us. But also at the same time, maybe we should reach out to compliance companies and or associations. And if you're not a member of an association or a trade body, maybe consider is now a good time to become a member and at least let that association or sort of the association take the brunt of finding out for you, because they'll always report back to you. You'll always be able to jump on podcasts and have it spoken about in an open forum. So I think there's a lots of things to be taken from it. There'll be more things that we probably haven't considered in this hour, which will come out, and we may need another hour later on in some time. But I
can imagine there's going to be many more live streams to be had over the coming months.
Yes, I'm sure. But I think because we're here now talking about it, and there's been a few more before us, and there'll be a few more after us, is good. I think it's a very good thing, and the more advice and the more help we can get out there, then it will stop people hopefully worrying when they shouldn't be worrying. And I think also step back and just acknowledge what we are doing as an industry, what we have done, what we are doing, and what we will do in the future, and be proud of it. I think there's a lot to be proud of in this industry, and I think we should always be grateful for being inside it. I certainly had a lifetime in the industry, and I've always been very, very proud of the sector, and and my customers are thankfully proud of us. But I think that's where I'd like to end, positively and looking forward to the future.
Thank you. We have had one more statement made, which is again a good one. Actually, we didn't quite get to it, so I'll just read this one out, and then I'll let you guys reply to it. So finally, under GDPR, it's going to be very interesting to see how agreements going back to 2007 are going to be administered. And yes, 100% agree. Common sense was delivered by the Supreme Court with absolute clarity. So the GDPR point is a good one. When we're looking so far back, and we talked about, it all came in 2018. There was a lot of things happened, and maybe the data is not there. So how are firms going to manage this, Nick?
Well, there's a few elements to 2007 first, which is one that when the law dates back to, which is a really important point, which is why 2007's been used. The statute of limitations usually applies to when you can bring a claim, but that's also from when you may have been aware. So if there's any concealment, then that flies back further as well. Mm-hmm. So there's been questions of the FCA whether they can cast it back. Of course, the FCA weren't in power until 2014, 2015 as well. So, you then going back to OFT laws, and the OFT, because they're not around, I can probably speak badly about them. They're pretty much non-existent. Like we used to help people with authorization, or not as the compliance guys, but when I worked for a finance company, and you just ticked every box and sent off a form, and now you can lend money. That's how fly by your pants it was. So I think we've got to be very careful to go back and ask for what records existed in 2007. But the Data Protection Act 2018, UK GDPR, was a point where everyone started to take things seriously, kind of like the Court of Appeal was last year. And so a lot of people did start deleting old data for absolutely reasons they thought were right. We no longer deal with that customer, let's delete it. Got to take everything that's can identify a customer and destroy it. Most of this were manual records. So it's a key challenge, and it's definitely one we'll be putting forward, and I know other people are putting forward, as to the relevance of that, and whether we can ask for definitive proof, which usually would pass to the lenders as their burden of proof, or whether some common sense again can apply.
Yeah. I think, again, just to reiterate what you've all said, it's important to get your points out there and to make sure that you are adding to this consultation period, and make sure that you are getting the common sense across. So, Nick, I feel like you got to give lots of statements back to the statements made. So would you like to now finish off? What is your closing remarks before we go offline in 2 minutes?
Engage in everything you can. I think LinkedIn's got very busy over the last week, if you follow this, with a lot of statements. I've, like I said at the start, got quite bored of it maybe already. But conversations, especially from people you wouldn't usually speak to, can be rather interesting. So use this as an opportunity to learn. I think, I'm certainly someone who believes in lifelong learning, and learning a little bit more about whatever industry you operate in and the pressures is only going to be beneficial for business. So take this as a point to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much all for your time. Thank you for letting us organise this so quickly, and for sharing your knowledge. I hope that from a viewer perspective, you've got a lot of really useful information and advice. We've had another point come through. I think we'll leave that one there. We can talk about this for hours. But I would say everyone's on LinkedIn.
I'll comment on LinkedIn on that, because it's a very funny one to join. So, yeah, I will.
I think the important thing to take from this is there's lots of opportunity for conversations to be had. There's lots of support in the industry, lots of people that have been around for a long time, and there's a lot of positive things we can take from it. That's where we'll leave it. And you can contact any of us, just find us on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next TCC.
Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.